American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone.
United 175, New York. We have some problems over here right now. We might have a hijack over here, two of them.
Oh my God, so both towers are now.
What if I told you the most devastating attack in American history was stopped 10 times before it happened? 10 different moments, 10 different people, 10 chances to change everything. Every single one failed. But here's what's more disturbing. The men who planned this weren't military geniuses, they weren't government insiders, they weren't invisible ghosts. They lived among ordinary Americans for over a year. They shopped at regular supermarkets, they had gym memberships. One of them literally rented a room from an FBI agent's wife. And nobody noticed. But the most chilling part? The part that nobody talks about? The entire plan cost just $500,000. America's response cost $6 trillion. That was always the real plan. And by the time you finish this video, you'll realize the most terrifying thing about September 11th wasn't the attack itself. It was how perfectly everything was designed to happen exactly the way it did. This is the story they never fully told you. It started with a single conversation in a cave. Afghanistan. A man named Osama bin Laden sits across from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. KSM, as intelligence would later call him, slides a piece of paper across the table. On it is a plan so audacious, so impossibly ambitious, that bin Laden initially says no. The original plan involved 10 planes, not 4. 10 aircraft simultaneously hijacked, crashed into targets across America. Nuclear plants, the CIA headquarters, the FBI building, 10 coordinated strikes that would bring America to its knees in a single morning. Bin Laden says it's too complicated, too many moving parts, too many chances for failure. So KSM simplifies it, strips it down. 4 planes, 4 targets, maximum impact with minimum complexity. Bin Laden approves, and the clock starts ticking toward September 11th, 2001. Here's what most people don't know. The plan had a name. Operation Holy Tuesday. And it was designed with one specific goal in mind. Not just to kill people, but to destroy America's confidence in its own safety forever. Every single detail was calculated. The date was chosen because 9/11 is the same number Americans dial in emergencies. Some analysts believe this was deliberate symbolism. America's emergency number turned against America itself. The targets weren't random either. The World Trade Center represented American economic power. The Pentagon represented American military power. The Capitol building represented American democracy. The White House represented American political power. 4 buildings, 4 symbols, 1 message: nowhere is safe. But the most chilling part of the plan wasn't the targets, it was the timing. The planes were all scheduled for early morning cross-country flights. Why? Maximum fuel. A plane flying from Boston to Los Angeles carries significantly more fuel than a short-haul flight. More fuel meant bigger explosions, more destruction, higher floors reached by fire. Every single detail calculated for maximum devastation. Now here's where it gets interesting. KSM needed pilots. Not just any pilots. He needed men who could take over commercial aircraft and fly them into specific buildings at specific angles. This wasn't a suicide mission for amateurs. This required real flying skill. So they went shopping for pilots in Hamburg, Germany. Why Hamburg? Because it had a large student population, international students, men who could blend in, get visas, enroll in universities without raising suspicion, men who were educated enough to learn complex aviation skills. That's where they found Mohammed Atta, an Egyptian architecture student. Quiet, disciplined, obsessive about details. He would become the operations ringleader. Here's what's stunning about Atta. He wasn't recruited the way you'd expect. He wasn't approached in a back alley or a secret meeting. He was part of a study group in Hamburg that slowly, gradually, became radicalized. The group met in apartments, discussed politics, listened to increasingly extreme sermons. By the time Atta was fully committed to the plan, he'd been in the process for years without even realizing it. That's how sophisticated this operation was. The recruitment itself was engineered to be invisible. January 2000. Atta and several others fly to Afghanistan. They meet bin Laden personally. Bin Laden gives them a choice of targets. He wants the White House and the Pentagon hit. He gives the pilots creative freedom on the remaining targets. Atta chooses the Twin Towers. Think about that for a second. The man who flew into the North Tower personally selected it as a target standing in an Afghan cave 18 months before it happened. After Afghanistan, the plan enters its most sophisticated phase, infiltrating America itself. The men don't enter the country together. They don't use the same airports. They don't communicate through phones that could be tapped. They come in separately, over months, using different entry points. Atta arrives in June 2000. Other operatives arrive through different cities. They spread across America, Florida, New Jersey, California, Arizona, and then they do something that still seems unbelievable. They walk into American flight schools and pay cash to learn how to fly. This is the part that should keep you up at night. The hijackers lived among ordinary Americans for over a year. They had apartments. Some had gym memberships. They bought food at regular supermarkets. They drove on American highways. Atta enrolled at Huffman Aviation in Venice, Florida. He paid $38,000 cash to learn commercial flight. His instructor later described him as an aggressive, impatient student who specifically wanted to learn how to fly large jets. He wasn't interested in takeoffs or landings. He specifically focused on in-flight maneuvering and navigation. Two of the hijackers rented a room from a retired FBI agent's wife in San Diego. They lived in a regular American neighborhood, went to a regular gym, ate at regular restaurants. One of the pilots trained at a flight school in Phoenix. His instructor actually filed a report with the FBI saying he was suspicious of a Middle Eastern student who only wanted to learn to steer large aircraft and showed no interest in standard aviation safety procedures. That report was filed in August 2001, 1 month before September 11th. It sat in a filing cabinet. Here's the part that will make your jaw drop. The CIA knew something was coming. In the summer of 2001, intelligence agencies received 40 separate warnings of an imminent Al-Qaeda attack on American soil. 40 warnings. The CIA's own briefing document from August 6, 2001 was titled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. President Bush received that briefing at his Texas ranch. It specifically mentioned hijackings. It specifically mentioned New York. The FBI field office in Minnesota had arrested a man named Zacharias Musui in August 2001. He'd enrolled in a flight school and told his instructors he only wanted to learn how to steer a plane, not take off or land. FBI agents wanted to search his laptop. Their request was denied by FBI headquarters because they didn't have enough evidence of a specific crime. His laptop contained contacts with Al-Qaeda operatives, names of the hijackers, details of the plot. All of this was sitting in government offices while Mohammed Atta was driving to Logan Airport. The intelligence existed, the warnings existed, but the system was broken. Different agencies had different pieces of the puzzle. The CIA wasn't sharing with the FBI. The FBI field offices weren't communicating with headquarters. Nobody was connecting the dots. September 2001. The operation enters its final phase. The hijackers begin moving to their positions across the country. They're not communicating by phone. They've been trained to use coded emails, public internet terminals, and face-to-face meetings only. They use their real names to buy plane tickets. Not fake identities, real names. American Airlines and United Airlines records show they purchased tickets weeks in advance, using credit cards, like ordinary passengers. Here's something chilling. Several of the hijackers had been flagged by the CAP's security screening system before September 11th. The system identified them as potential security risks and did nothing. Because in 2001, being flagged meant your checked luggage got extra screening. It didn't mean you got personally searched. It didn't mean you got pulled out of line. You just walked through the gate like everyone else. The entire screening process in 2001 was designed for one specific threat: guns. Metal detectors looking for metal. But box cutters had metal handles that were below the detectable threshold, and box cutters were legal to carry onto planes. The weapons passed through security. The hijackers passed through security. Everything was in place. The night before, the hijackers do something unexpected. They go out. Atta and another hijacker visit a bar in Portland, Maine. They drink. They eat seafood. Atta appears relaxed, almost jovial according to witnesses. A man who had spent years planning the most devastating attack in American history spent his last night eating lobster and drinking vodka. Other hijackers visit a bar in Florida earlier in the summer and reportedly talked loudly about planes and America getting what it deserves. The bartender remembered them, reported it after September 11th. Some of the hijackers send final emails to family. One writes letters that are found later. The letters give detailed spiritual instructions for the morning of the attack, what prayers to say, how to prepare mentally, what to think about during the final moments. The letters reveal something disturbing about the psychology of the operation. These men had completely separated themselves from the reality of what they were doing. They'd been so thoroughly radicalized that they believed they were performing a sacred act. They slept well that night. While 2,877 people they'd never met were sleeping peacefully, completely unaware of what morning would bring. 5:33 a.m., Portland International Jetport, Maine. Atta and another hijacker pass through security. The CAP system flags them. Their checked bags are held while they're verified. They pass. They board a commuter flight to Boston. At Logan Airport, Boston, the 4 hijacking teams begin boarding. They're spread across the plane, not sitting together, to avoid drawing attention. They have assigned seats. They've studied the aircraft layouts. They know where the cockpit is, where flight attendants are stationed, where exits are. It's the weapons they're carrying. Box cutters, small knives, and according to some accounts, fake explosive devices designed to look real enough to terrify passengers into compliance. At 7:59 a.m., American Flight 11 pushes back from gate B32. The lead flight attendant, Amy Sweeney, walks through the cabin doing final checks. She looks at the passengers, sees nothing unusual, smiles, returns to her station. In seats 8D and 8G sit 2 men who have been waiting for this moment for 3 years. 24 a.m., the plane reaches cruising altitude. The hijackers move. Here's exactly what happened in those cockpits, and it's more calculated than anyone realizes. The hijackers didn't rush. They waited for a specific moment, after takeoff, after the seatbelt sign was turned off, when passengers were relaxed and moving around, when the flight attendants were serving drinks. The moment of maximum distraction. They used the box cutters to take control of the cabin. Reports indicate they claimed to have a bomb. Some had fake explosive devices strapped to their bodies. The passengers had no reason to disbelieve them. This appeared to be a traditional hijacking. Take control, make demands, negotiate. Nobody in 2001 had been trained to think of a hijacking as a suicide mission. Every hijacking protocol, every airline training manual, every government procedure was based on one assumption: the hijackers want to live too. Negotiate, comply. Everyone goes home. That assumption was the final piece of the plan. Atta had specifically chosen this psychological weapon, the assumption that compliance meant survival. The pilots were either killed or incapacitated. Atta, who had his commercial pilot license, took the controls of a Boeing 767 carrying 10,000 gallons of jet fuel. He made one navigational error. He accidentally broadcast to air traffic control instead of the passenger cabin. Controllers heard him say, "We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay." Controllers heard it, recorded it, reported it. By then, the plane was already pointing toward Manhattan. This is what the government spent years trying to explain. When air traffic controllers realized what was happening, they called NORAD. Fighter jets scrambled from Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts. 2 F-15 Eagles, the fastest fighters in the American inventory, capable of 875 miles per hour. They were 153 miles from New York. Here's the problem nobody talks about. They didn't know where to go. NORAD's entire defense system was designed to track threats coming from outside America. Radar pointed outward, watching for Soviet missiles coming over the Arctic. The system was not designed to track a domestic aircraft that had turned off its transponder and was flying at low altitude inside American airspace. The military was looking for an enemy that was already inside the house. The fighters flew toward the last known position of Flight 11, but the plane had changed course and dropped altitude. They were searching thousands of cubic miles of sky for one aircraft. At 8:46 a.m., while the fighters were still 71 miles away, Mohammed Atta flew American Flight 11 into the North Tower at 466 miles per hour. The fighters arrived over New York 12 minutes later. 12 minutes too late. Here's the psychological genius of the plan. As horrifying as that sounds, the second plane was always meant to be seen. The first impact guaranteed news cameras would be pointing at the Twin Towers. Every major network had cameras on the burning North Tower within minutes. America was watching. Then United Flight 175 banked and turned. The pilot, Marwan al-Shehi, could see the North Tower burning from the cockpit. He adjusted his approach to maximize the angle of impact for cameras on the ground. At 9:03 a.m., with the entire world watching live on television, he flew into the South Tower. The impact was designed to be witnessed. The psychological effect was immediate and total. This was not an accident. This was not a navigation failure. America was under attack. That single moment of being watched changed everything. Panic spread instantly. Markets froze. Government buildings began evacuating. The president was rushed to Air Force One. The vice president was carried to a bunker. And in the sky, 2 more planes were still flying toward their targets. American Flight 77 had been flying west, away from its intended target, seemingly lost. Air traffic controllers had lost contact at 8:56 a.m. For 36 minutes, nobody knew where it was. Then it reappeared on radar near Washington, D.C., flying at 500 miles per hour, completing a 270-degree turn. At 9:37 a.m. it hit the Pentagon, the most heavily defended building in America. Home to the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the nerve center of American military power. And it was hit because the plane came in low and fast from a direction that ground defenses weren't covering. Surface-to-air missiles protected the Pentagon from aerial threats, but they required radar lock. At the speed and altitude Flight 77 was traveling in its final approach, there wasn't enough time to react. The Pentagon, designed to survive nuclear near misses, took a direct hit from a commercial aircraft. The plan was working perfectly. Everything was going exactly as designed, except for one thing. The passengers of United Flight 93 had phones. Cell phones in 2001 were primitive by today's standards, but they worked. And in the 40 minutes between takeoff and hijacking, passengers had been talking to family, listening to voicemails, reading text messages. They knew about the Twin Towers before the hijackers realized they knew. Tom Burnett called his wife 4 times. By the 3rd call, he told her, "I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it." Jeremy Glick told his wife they'd taken a vote among the passengers. They were going to try to take back the plane. Todd Beamer was on the phone with a GTE airphone operator named Lisa Jefferson. He asked her to recite the Lord's Prayer with him. Then he said the words that would become the motto of American resistance that day. The passengers organized in the rear of the plane. They collected boiling water from the galley. They made a battering ram from the food cart. They coordinated their assault with military precision. The cockpit voice recorder captured what happened next. The hijackers heard the passengers coming. They began rolling the plane violently, trying to throw them off balance. The passengers kept coming. At 10:03 a.m., United 93 crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The hijackers crashed the plane rather than let passengers retake the cockpit. The intended target, later confirmed by investigators, was the United States Capitol building. 40 ordinary Americans armed with boiling water and a food cart saved American democracy. Here's the final most important thing about how this was planned. The attack was never designed to militarily defeat America. Al-Qaeda wasn't delusional. They knew they couldn't beat the American military in direct combat. The attack was designed to provoke America into destroying itself. The plan was based on a specific strategic theory, that America would respond to a massive attack with massive military force. That military force in Muslim-majority countries would create anger and resentment. That anger would drive more people toward extremism. That more extremism would mean more attacks. and that the economic cost of fighting endless wars would eventually bankrupt and exhaust America. The 9/11 Commission report, the most detailed investigation in American history, later concluded that the operation cost Al-Qaeda approximately $400,000 to $500,000 to execute. America's response cost over $6 trillion across 20 years of war. The economic damage from the attacks themselves, $3.3 trillion. The attack on American confidence, American openness, American freedom of movement, immeasurable. In terms of pure strategic return on investment, the 102 minutes of September 11th triggered consequences that are still unfolding today. Here's what they never tell you in the history books. The plan almost failed completely, not because of American defenses, but because of pure chance. The South Tower, which was hit second, collapsed first. Structural engineers later determined that the angle of impact on the South Tower created a more catastrophic distribution of damage than the near direct hit on the North Tower. If the towers had collapsed in the order they were hit, the North Tower's collapse would have taken down the South Tower with it, killing everyone still evacuating. Instead, the South Tower's earlier collapse gave people in the North Tower an additional 29 minutes to evacuate. Those 29 minutes saved thousands of lives. The phone call that accidentally broadcast to air traffic control gave the system an extra 9 minutes of warning that changed the entire military response. The passengers of Flight 93 saving the capital prevented what would have been perhaps the most symbolically devastating blow of all. Small moments, accidental mistakes, random choices. That's the part that keeps historians and investigators up at night. The plan was extraordinarily sophisticated. It exploited every weakness in American security with surgical precision. It accounted for media response, military response times, and human psychology. But it couldn't account for the flight attendant who kept making phone calls, or the passengers who had cell phones and weren't afraid to fight back, or the terrorist who pressed the wrong button on the radio. If you experienced something on that day, even if it was a sad moment, we'd love to hear your story. Comment down below.